the most important thing is to live in the present moment. That's all you've got. And that, I think, is what came to me, at 85. It's like, how long? 5 years? 10 years? Someone's after this operation, and we were I was well on the road to recuperation, and I was talking to one of our nurses out at our infirmary in Tewkesbury, Mass, where it's about 15 minutes from where I live. And I was visiting, or I was out there, and we got chatting. She was asking me about, the surgery and how I was feeling, and then she looked at me and said, well, these operations are good for 15 years. I said, 100? But again, it's a short period of time, no matter how much you extend it. So whatever I have left, in God's time and through God's will, I want to live in gratitude and in joy, and to be as available as I can. People say, when are you going to... This is my life. Being with people like you, it's like any time you've entered into some type of service, whether it's feeding the homeless or getting shelter for those, how many times do you say, God, I'm getting so much more out of this than whatever I'm doing, for the other? And that's the truth. It's 100-fold. Yes. Excuse me.
Yes, Father Bill. We have a question from William Ferrarone. What about righteous anger, such as abuse or overt neglect, regarding the welcoming prayer?
That's a great question, and I would answer it this way. I would still, with righteous, and there is righteous anger. Absolutely, there is righteous anger that cries out to God. No question about it. When you look at some of the horrific things that have taken place, and you name the place. So, that's a healthy reaction, because we're committed to action on behalf of justice. That's an integral part of our faith. It's not tendential. Action on behalf of justice is an integral part of our faith. So, to go back to I would still say, I would welcome righteous anger. And I would still allow myself to go through the process of the welcoming prayer. Focusing, sinking in, welcoming, letting go. And the letting go helps to clear the emotional turmoil. When you're in righteous anger, you're really upset. And it's covering, it's really... So to be able to allow the welcoming prayer to help dissipate that that intensity, then you're able to speak the truth in love. So I would just say, I want to affirm the experience of righteous anger, given, the circumstances. But I would still encourage, give the welcoming prayer as a process, as part of your discovering how you are being called to respond to this experience of righteous anger. How are you being called to respond? Well, if you respond with intensity, not going to go anywhere. There'll be reaction. There still may be reaction, but so that's what I would suggest.
How do people who are enslaved deal with that in terms of the welcoming prayer, which seemed to me would be kind of to dull down the response, the emotional response?
No, I would really say that. I mean, and again, I cannot speak experientially for someone that has experienced, the condition of slavery. But it is totally, totally, totally unacceptable. It's inhumane. There's no way in God's good earth that you can justify it. And very frankly, the Catholic Church, the Jesuits in Maryland and at Georgetown are coming to terms with this grave injustice when they utilize slave labor to build Georgetown. You know, so anyone caught up in that system, obviously, you know, it's dehumanizing, and whatever they're feeling, I would still want to encourage them to allow that feeling to surface from within their own depth. And the only reason, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but the only reason I'm saying or suggesting embracing the welcoming prayer as a first step is that it helps to dissipate the intensity. If you're living and acting out of intensity, it's not going to go very far. And that's only, you know, the proof of the pudding is in the doing. You know, and until you begin to put this into practice, it might sound like a lot of gobbledygook, you know, or just, but I've had too many experiences in my own life. There was a time when I was in leadership within my own community, and not so much within the community, but within some of the parishes, for example, that we had to leave. How do you think people feel when the community that served them for sometimes 30, 40, 50 years are going to have to depart? And you have to talk about it. And I had to do that a number of times. And the reactions are all over the lot. Some will just say, well, thanks so much. You know, we're very grateful. Others will say, why us? And then they get into and you just have to stay with them. And the only way I could stay with them, because, you know, when you get a broadside, you react, you know, and I could do the welcoming prayer even as I listened and try to respond to whatever the question might be. So you bring it into daily life. This is not, you know, something dramatic and only used when, no, anytime you become upset, really upset. Before you act, enter into this process, and you will act with a great deal more wisdom, where people may even begin to hear you and even shift and say, wow, oh, I didn't realize that. You get into a dialogue. That's what we've lost the capacity for. That's what we're politically and religiously, what you name the issue, people are just throwing cannonballs. It's not going to go anywhere. It's destructive. And we have a responsibility to do better. Because Jesus says, at the end of the day, love one another as I have loved you. That's the path. Well, it's hard. Yeah. Get over it. Yes.
For me, sometimes it's hard to balance this cosmic, mystical God of such great power and of such great love back to maybe moments when I need the comforting of the Jesus God that I know. How do you balance those?
Well, I would say, Bernadine, you know, we're living in a time in which we are being called, I just mentioned this, but I think it's a vision that we need to let wash over us. We're being called to collaborate with the cosmic Christ in bringing all things to completion for God's honor and glory. That's a Teilhardian approach, a very Jesuitical approach to, so that, I mean, that's the vision. And then within that vision, we've got different examples, different human experiences, and then, with the afflictive emotions or something really upsets you, it doesn't withdraw you from that loving presence of the cosmic Christ. You're being supported, you're being embraced, and you're being invited to do the work. And when I say invited to do the work, I'm not talking about a willful, oh, just tell me what to do. I'm saying these practices that we integrate into our lives help us to enter more fully, more consciously into this process of transformation. So I think it's like a both and, Bernadine. One doesn't exclude the other. And certainly to be taken up with Jesus's depth of emotion, when he cried over Jerusalem, when, there were different moments, fully human, fully divine. So it's, we look at him as an example, but the being drawn into this process of evolution and transformation, it's like, wow, maybe it's just the musings of an old man, but I think it's terrific. I really do. It gives me such optimism that ultimately all shall be well. I believe that at the end of the day.
Would you say something about the gifts and the talents that we recognize come from God and our call to service? And sometimes that call and that maybe enthusiasm and maybe commitment leads us to live a life not in peace, but one of stress because of what I say yes to, and I'm not really, I'm doing the work, but it doesn't become peaceful. It's more of a, I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, stress.
Stress.
Yeah.
Creates stress.
Welcoming. No, really, because the stress, no matter, how admirable the work is, the outreach to others, if it you're doing the service out of a love for God, but feeling, the residual of that stress, you have to pay attention. Is the stress a physical indicator you may be overextended? And that's where, you listen to that and sort of, reassess. But my antenna goes up when people will talk about stress or, doing wonderful things. It's, no, we've got to stop and look at that. And that again could be welcoming prayer material. It could simply be coming to an awareness you're overextended. How do you feel? How do you experience feelings of overextension? You get tired, you're still doing it, but it's like, so that there's got to be a balance. There's really got to be a balance. So
if they don't want to look at that and they don't want to acknowledge that and own their own truth, there's nothing.
You can't know. The only person you can change is yourself. If someone is caught up in stress and letting that stress be a primary activator, they're going to get sick.
Yeah, pay attention to your body as
well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How are you doing? Body, mind, spirit. You're just not living in the head. That's, again, the beauty of contemplative outreach. And so many recent authors on spirituality will be talking about holistic body. It's body, mind, spirit. Are you in tune and at home with this unity? It's a unity of body, mind, spirit, and it needs to be We need to, it's self-care. We need to minister to ourselves. Don't overdo it.